Hi, today I'm going to talk about low and high context communication. It's a little hard to wrap your heads around, and but stick with me and remember to think of these concepts on a scale. It's not either or. It's not these hard and fast rules that people have to abide by, but they're these flexible behaviors that happen to different degrees in various cultures. So let me repeat that. Most of these differences and similarities are found in all the cultures, but in varying degrees. And so it's not low power distance versus high power distance, or individualism versus collectivism, or in this case, high context cultures versus low context cultures. It's not, it's the degree of which all of these are present in every culture. So I'm going to look at low context cultures and high context cultures today. Some general differences are that the low context cultures are direct, they're specific in their communication style, and they like detailed messages. So, in the fact that we're studying intercultural communication and we have little tips on how to do things, that should give you a good idea of where the United States falls on the scale of low and high context cultures. And high context cultures generally rely a little bit more on indirect messages, ambiguous. They're generally a little bit vague. It doesn't mean that they don't have any details. It's just when they talk about everyday communication, interpersonal communication, when they have communication between two people, it's a lot more indirect compared to low context cultures. So think of it as an iceberg. Do you remember the iceberg? So how much is under the surface and how much is above the surface? So for low context cultures, most of the stuff that of an iceberg we see, and it's above the waterline. So in low context cultures, we see everything. The context is much more visible, versus in high context cultures, the context is hidden. There, it's kind of the true iceberg. The stuff that you don't see, that is below the surface. So let's look at the low context cultures first, communication contexts first, and these are some of the details from your textbook. I'm going to explain a little bit more. So low context cultures generally are individualistic cultures generally, but they're very reliant on linear process of thinking, linear process of logic. And they're much more direct, like I already said, in terms of their style of speech, verbal style. And it's totally fine in low context cultures to do a little bit of self enhancement, for example, or assertiveness, small talk or talkativeness in that way. It's also informal in some ways, and sometimes generally you can say that it's also low power distance or small power distance cultures also have low context communication as well, versus high context cultures. So in low context cultures, what you see is what you get, generally speaking, and versus in high context cultures, the hidden meanings are below the surface, or the true meanings could be below the surface. So what you see may not be what you get. And so generally speaking, low context cultures, low context communication patterns tend to be collectivists also in value. They also have a spiral logic rather than linear. Or circular in some other descriptions you can talk about. They don't start at one point and then logically follow the conclusion based on that. So stories are much more circular in nature, and they're a little bit more verbal. They also have, in high context cultures, they also do a lot of face-saving types of talk. They could be a little formal, so sometimes more high power distance or cultures are also generally could be seen as high context cultures. And so basically, to think about high context cultures is that sometimes what you see is not what you get. A few weeks ago, when I did the example about asking for food, and And in low context cultures, if somebody offers food and you say, hey, I'm not hungry, and you say, yeah, okay, this person is not hungry. But in high context cultures, generally don't do that. That meaning where you say you're not hungry, it might mean something else. It might mean that the host has to offer 2 or 3 more times, and there's a little subtle dance that goes on, and so some of these behaviors are these culture bumps. Remember that terminology can happen in these low versus high context cultures. So again, post in the Ask Away section if you have any questions about high and low context cultures. I'll be happy to answer.